How about some more? Okay. Regarding cost, pros and cons, and the possibility of independence that we were talking about last time. Consider, through man, life has a certain need, as we've mentioned several times, for a continuity, for a kind of orderly growth. And this gets manifested in some ways that I was going to mention that is not normally thought about in the ways in which we're going to think about them, right? So ponder these areas, and if you'd like to play a game as we go along, which costs no more, ask yourself, what do these things have in common? Are you ready? The need for heroes, the lure of antiquity tied to devotion to fashion, the intrigue with poetic sadness, pessimism. See, I'm pausing this as, 8 or 10 I'm going to do. You understand? They're all, think about it, the need for heroes, the lure of antiquity, along with the slavish devotion to fads and style. That's 2. 3 is the intrigue with poetic pessimism. Sometimes they clean that up a little bit, but to hell with it, that's what it is. All forms of chauvinism, city, state, family, religious. Are you playing along? What do these all have in common? The polishing of revenge. Keep it nice and shiny. You understand the polishing of the desire for revenge, of course, but you can figure that out. And number 5 or 6 or whatever it is, the great concern over death. The ordinary idea of the march of progress. That's a different number now than the concern over death. Unless you thought it was the same, and then you can skip the rest of the nights. You can go right on to the pop quiz. And you can pop it on yourself. All fashions of reminiscing, that didn't cost extra either. And how many is that? It doesn't matter. And all notions of gods. That's enough. What do all of these have in common? All right. They are all forms of the genetic line of succession. I assume all of you, I sort of stole part of that. The line or the order of succession is normally referred to in areas having to do with matters in the body politic. But the whole idea of succession, of being the process by which a person, an institution, an idea, a community, of which one is followed properly by another, such as it was the regal succession of the throne, that it's the proper succeeding of one person, institution, group by another, or its proper replacement. There is a genetic line of succession. And what it amounts to is, to answer my own game of what did those things have in common, they are all forms, they are all aspects of the support system, part of the system, of all of the orderly, predictable ways in which, and self-protection, of the way in which life expands, genetically, of course, through man. You can look upon an operational definition for the night. You could consider that this genetic line of succession is how life automatically, orderly, stably, even predictably, that is, with no surprises, is how life evolves through man in what we've been calling the secondary world. We're not speaking now in any meaningful fashion about what other people would think of as being the physical evolution, because man is not changing that much, and any change that's going on does not have any pertinence in your lifetime, as we've already established. Unless you are kin to the Simpsons, you're not about to grow another foot or another ear or another eye in your lifetime. Neither is any community. There is not any proper, you recall I said proper in defining succession, the proper replacement or the proper succeeding of one group or one person, and even a little more non-specific ideas being properly in succession one to another or replacing one to another. And you're not having this kind of replacement physically. Man is not changing physically. And that's a form of evolution where your parents were replaced by you and you have 3 legs, whereas they had 2. But there is a genetic line of succession that is not seen, that is not noted, that has very specific and observable ramifications within not only a lifetime, but in generation markings, within 20 years, nowadays sometimes even faster. And that is in all these kinds of areas that I just picked out, those 8 or 10 examples, that all of those that you might think are, and forget any sort of judgment about all the things, all the way from heroes to desire for revenge to gods, the ideas of gods, rather than considering that this might be some psychological reflection of human needs. Let me put it to you more directly, that it is, in fact, your genes that need heroes, to take the first example. It's not you. It's not you intellectually. It's not any human. Now, I say intellectually, and that would include for those who might have stumbled in off the secondary streets, it does not include in any way a man's soul, a man's spirit, whatever the hell they think that is. It all amounts to the talking into the nervous system. It is not that needs heroes. It is not that seeks revenge. It is not that needs gods. It is not that writes paeans to suffering, that's intrigued with death, that always wants to look back while simultaneously thinking, am I up to date? Am I looking back and worrying about the past in the way that is now popular? Am I a reminiscer in some old figged manner? That's musician talk for out of date. Moldy fig. It is your genes. Let's just stick with one example. I didn't get much of a rise out of you. Maybe some of you are not really from the genetic line derived from Martha White, but figure that out for yourself. But I didn't get much of a rise out of you non-erotic baking soda people. But consider, you can take any of the others, but how about heroes? It is your genes. It is the genetic line of succession going through man at the secondary level that make people have heroes. And everyone that is reasonably sane, just part of the middle class, middle of the bell curve of life, have heroes. No matter what they say, no matter how they describe it. Sometimes, I don't want to get you hung up on the idea of just the word, what people think of as role models. What people do that even would not be that necessarily specific in their own verbiage to themselves, in their own conversations with their own partner. But it's to look at anybody, any idea, just to see a fleeting electronic visual glimpse of Cher walking by on the screen, or of Tom Hanks or whoever, and to go, and to be favorably in some way impressed, to respond to it. It is not a show which we could do psychologically. It is not a show in some way to say, well, now, if we had a man here, let's take this man, that all he thinks about is professional football. He goes and he buys all these jerseys. He goes and spends twice as much as he could get one at Kmart, like God intended, just so he can get one that actually has the imprimatur of the National Football League. And he sits around, he's got a beer gut, and he's out of shape. He'll sit there and holler at the TV. There's some kind of psychological flaw, which should not be that hard to see, because there he is. He's overweight, smokes, he drinks, he doesn't get any exercise, and it's a kind of compensation. Papa Freud would have understood that. Homer would have understood that. And so he's simply trying to compensate, and he has these heroes because he dreams of being that which he will not take the effort to do himself. Boy, you can't deny all that. Or ugly. If you're an ugly woman, you love to look at Harper's Bazaar, or you love to look at, boy, how I would look if I had the money to have $2.5 million worth of plastic surgery. All of that is good enough for the city. It is not a man's intellect. It is not a man's psyche. It is not a man's psychological flaws. It is not a man's anything that has heroes. It's the genetic line of succession. It is not man that writes history. It is not man who enjoys history. It is not man who enjoys intellectually or spiritually or any other way hearing wise words from 4,000 years ago. How about 4 years ago? We'll include that. 4 days ago? You got it. It is not man. It's the genetic line of succession. It is man's genes that need gods. It is man's genes that need heroes. It is man's genes that have to be concerned over death. Now, there's no doubt. It gets reflected somewhere, since man's genes cannot talk in a way that city people can understand, trying to be truthful, trying to level with you people. It is not man, although he reflects it, but it is not man that needs revenge. It is not man that needs any ideas of whether we are evolving or involving, devolving. All of the things I mentioned, and many more, but the ones I mentioned, all of those things are needed by your genes. And look back, or look at it a little more expansive manner as me saying the genetic needs of life, the genetic line of succession through man. But if you want to at least keep it, or to start out at a fairly reasonable, unusual level, personal level, is forget this for a second. Just take it as an interesting notion. It is not this, and I will assume that all of you are past the part of worrying about, I have to keep including, it's not your mind, plus it's not your soul, it's not your spirit. I mean, this is where it all is. It's not that, although that reflects it. But it is not that crying out. It's not that is the background need for heroes, for gods, for some sort of stories having to do with death. It is not that needs stories as to why you want to make rude noises, or if not smells, and mark out areas, but to show that you are above a hippo or a warthog. We call it patriotism. We call it fidelity to our forefathers' religion. All of that can be explained. All of that's already been explained long before I got here about what's going on with ordinary people here. But I am telling you, it is not this that needs it. It is this that's having to execute it. It is this that is the messenger. That is you. It's the genes. It is the genetic needs of the genetic line of succession going through man that makes man have heroes, that makes man invent gods, that makes man worry about death, that makes man worry about things are not going at all well, and every other thing I mentioned. It is, I'll say as strange as it may sound to somebody if they were listening with one ear, it is a man's genes and it is humanity's genes, but it is a man's genes that need for him to feel patriotic, for him to feel prideful, for him to feel fearful. If you were going to try and consider what we were also talking about, of what would be real independent thinking, as opposed to the ordinary camps of everybody. And of course, everything I mentioned above is polarized. Everything has two camps. That is, everybody needs heroes. So we can start off, make it crude, and we announce that to the world, and some group over here says, we don't. So we got that much. So we say, all right, you guys go take a walk. All right, all of humanity needs heroes. And everybody that's left says, yes, we do. And we say, well, would you mention one? And one crowd runs up a name. Make up your, history as well. They run up a name. And what happens? There'll immediately be a whole group that even if they're being fairly civilized, as soon as they hear this one name run up, they're going to go, oh, Jesus, oh, God. So I'll turn to those and I say, well, how about you people? Do you mean you have a better one? Now that you ask us. And so they run up their name, and this other group, plus probably some of the ones that didn't like that one, then they go, good grief, I thought the first one was dumb. So you have that, as opposed to what people imagine to be some sort of independent, some sort of attempted objective, scientific, clinical, scientific observation of any affair. All the way from physics to, as they keep struggling to do, into the world of the human psyche. That in some way we'll finally bring it down to I think they say maybe, that we'll finally, or maybe they say hopefully now, they like that, that maybe hopefully we'll bring this down someday to a scientific basis. I notice none of them are holding their breath. None of them are changing professions or making very strong promises like, I'm in the forefront, at least of talking about bringing man's psyche down to a scientific basis. And I tell you, as one of the world's leading experts in this field, if I do not succeed at this within the next blank year, 10 years, 50 years, I will go into another profession. I'll actually get a job. You notice nobody does that. So they can be talking about it, but back to what we were talking about last time, the possibility of real independent thought, that you are not in any way involved with the pro and con. That you are not waiting for one of them to trip. You're not waiting for one of them to be displaced so that you can go in. Independence would be that which apparently had no purpose. That you're just not playing with the dance. You don't want in the dance. You don't want out of the dance. You're not playing. Which the best that can be understood verbally on that right quick, not to keep backing up from the last time or to the last time, would be to ordinary intelligence, its attitude, what it would hear would be, well, the sentence, the idea, I guess, is rhetorically reasonable, but to what avail? To what purpose? Why would anybody do that? And of course, at the ordinary level, they wouldn't. But, since we are not at the ordinary level, if you were going to consider being independent, if you were trying to pursue what would be independent thinking, what you would have to be doing in regard to what we were just talking about now is you would have to be in some way struggling to not be fully captive of the great embrace of the genetic line of succession. You would in some way have to be not just dancing with destiny. You could not be just dancing with genetic destiny. You would in some way have to be feeding. You would have to, assuming that you started out with this basis, that you had some spark, some itch, some interest in this sort of thing, so that you recognized it, or you had to have it, but then you would have to encourage it. You would have to feed it in some way, and it would have to be almost a kind of apparently purposeless kind of intellectual food. That is, that you would not be thinking about whatever the dance was in any pro or con manner. Because if you cannot do that, then you are forever dancing with destiny. And to take care of any ordinary rats that may have crawled into our hole, it doesn't matter what. If you're worried about destiny, you might as well be a Calvinistic Baptist, not bastard. Watch it. That is, you got to be involved with those stories. Wait a minute, you mean that there could be, that we are in some way predestined either by the gods or by our genes? And I'll play along for a second, for a purpose. And if you went, well, maybe, I don't know, maybe, what do you think of that idea? What's ordinary intelligence going to do? Well, it'd either say, you know what, I've always thought that. I've always suspected that. Or the other popular version of that song is slightly different. Well, you can do it in the same key, but the other version is, that's hogwash. Thank you, thank you. No, dancing with destiny, you mean that everything's predestined. It's either that or it's not, right? Well, yes, okay. You see, we don't have to deal with those people anymore because they got it nailed down. Don't you see? Because they can dance the rest of their life. No, you didn't miss that. They can say, wait a minute, back up. Are you saying yes or no? I mean, not that they have to even believe it, but I would just like to know where you stand. Did you say yes or no? Well, they got it nailed down, as always. The ordinary intellect, not they, the ordinary intellect. Okay, they've got it nailed down. Or if you're talking about dancing with destiny, then you're saying that things are, that you just can't escape the destiny of your own genes, the destiny of the genetic makeup of humanity. Well, come on. Well, you're either saying that or you're not. Okay, yeah, now we got it. See? And those people can take notes or put in their lunchbox and they go home. You can dance alone, which is the same thing as dancing with somebody. Because you dance around thinking, how dumb could somebody be? Is that what they really said? Do those people believe that? Is that what I thought when I heard that a couple hours ago? Did I get confused on the way home? You would have to be feeding a kind of independent thinking. You would have to be feeding it a kind of non-pro-archon food, or, since we can dismiss those people, or I'm going to tell you, you are forever dancing with destiny. And some of you can, or should enjoy, that your own nervous system will still rail, without me having to point and imply like we're talking about somebody else, that your own nervous system wants to go, well, what? You mean dancing with destiny? You mean it's possible or not possible? In the city, some of you got to be able to do this on your own, but I'll do it for you right quick. In the city even, you would have some people who apparently even rise up a little. They pass for being unusually insightful, if not intelligent, and they're the ones that after a hard night, much coffee, maybe even other substances, can go, wait a minute. We're into an interesting area, because what if we're almost totally run by our own genetic makeup and that of humanity? Then what of these people that you guys seem to be talking about? What if you tried to get away from that? How would you know that you're actually doing anything? Because it's just the genes, maybe just a few anomalous little sidetracks here, makes a few people go, wait a minute. We're all being run by just absolute genetic destiny, but I'm too smart for that. But what if it's just life, just some kind of, maybe a little electricity that's dripping out, as some of those great philosophers back in the 20s, I think it was known as the Thurber School, that like an open outlet on your wall, or if you got and you take a bulb out, the electricity can come out. It's like you lose it kind of drifts off. Then these people, these city intellectuals, can say, wait, that's nothing. We have people here running around even in worse circles, because what if a man here and there went, wait a minute, I'm almost convinced that we're almost totally locked into some kind of genetic drive wherein we have almost no freedom of will. And I am almost convinced of that. And then this guy says, but wait a minute, what if life lets somebody here and there think that? They're in the same boat. Nothing's been accomplished. Who would vote that we stop there for the night? And many people's intellect could go, you could take a little nappy poo, put on your little cerebral jammies with the feet at the bottom. Well, all right. If you were going to pursue the attempt to be able to think independently and not be limited either pro or con, just not be limited by that kind of genetic tango of destiny, of either being far against everything from heroes to history to the future, to all of your fears, to all the dreams that would run through the nervous system, to not be absolutely limited to that, to try and feed something that suspects otherwise, that can sometimes believe it hears otherwise. In what ways might one attempt this? You notice that we sometimes sound more and more like Presbyterian. In what ways might one? No wonder some of us get so sleepy at times. I think we've already done that joke, though, didn't we, last week, about how you know you're a Presbyterian. But sometimes when you're talking seriously, you put yourself to sleep. At least you can come to and realize that you're not in the wrong place. You didn't stumble into a Catholic church or Well, I was just going to mention such methods. We've already talked about them in the past, but if you will look at them now, if you consider it in light with that list I started out with, all the things about the need for heroes and the idea of role models and the love of antiquity of 4,000 years ago or 4 hours ago, all the way through death, ideas of progress or devolution, fear of not getting revenge, of being mistreated, all the way to all notions of gods. In light with that, how about some of the things that we have talked about several times? Those kind of ephemeral descriptions of what you might do if you did suspect an almost inescapable genetic succession that ends up being a kind of dance with destiny. If there was any chance to get away, what might be some of the ways to temporarily describe? How about thinking more than you have to? Now, we talked about that once or twice, but consider as simple. I don't have to play some sort of strange translator. I mean, strange enough, I made up the damn term. I mean, I'm the one who discovered this long-lost ancient idea. But to think more than you have to, as opposed to a pro and con, the reasonable intellectual approach to anything, that anything we're going to consider, is man free at all, or is he simply captive of greater genetic needs of life or the biosphere of the planet? I mean, it's one or the other. That may not be the final answer to the questions that plague men's souls. Is that what the shoes are doing in the highway? It's men whose souls became overly plagued and they leaped out the window and tried to commit suicide? I don't know. It's just a thought. It's a theory. It's a possibility. I don't know. Of course, then you're into, does a shoe have a soul? I leave that to you Presbyterians and you Baptists. Are some shoes predestined to wear out and some are not? I don't know. At any rate, in the city, as you know, any question, even if they were confronted with city intellects, if it was confronted with, are men free-willed or are they not? Now, nowadays, people are sophisticated enough that they would very likely say, now, we'll consider that question, but that does not mean, whatever answer we come up with, does not mean that that's the final word. It may or may not be on that subject, but that doesn't mean that you've answered everything. Okay. So whatever the question is, there is a pro and con. That it's always polarized, or it would not be a question. There'd be no question. So the idea of thinking more than you have to, once you see it, without me trying to make it sound real exotic, or to zen it up, or to try to make it sound as though it is somewhere from the undiscovered wardrobe of Rod Serling, or Star Trek, The Unknown Generation. Is simply think about my description. If you continually are on one subject, you thought more than you had to. If you will not wrestle with me, especially you Presbyterians wearing your good clothes, if you think more than you have to, you have already put a full frontal plus unexpected monkey grip on any dance with destiny. Because everyone, listen quick, everyone is destined to think a certain amount about everything. So that's how you can't get away from it. Anybody wants to write me and say, well, I enjoy seeing some of these and hearing about it, but I don't understand it. Well, you're dancing with such a form of destiny that if you're a man, I suggest that it is kneeing you in your privates and distracting you. Because to say you think more than you have to, you're destined to think a certain amount about everything. If you don't believe it, just listen to that and you go, okay. You know, the okay being, all right, I thought about that. What's the rest of it? Or else, okay, I hear that, but you're wrong. Or else, all right, I hear that, but now what's the rest? That's not thinking more than you have to. Could be. No. No. Many people survived the flood. They survived Dante. But I don't know, some of you might get captured by Monty Python. So we're not going to go into, wait, that's not thinking more than you have to. It could be. No, it's not, or you wouldn't say that. I might. No! See, it's all good stuff. It's all real good stuff that might not be absolutely tied to the weight of this planet. Like all good stuff, it cannot be proven. I mean, it's not even close. It's not anywhere to even talk about. Well, wait a minute. I like some of the ideas. I like some of the feel of this. But can you prove just one part of it? Thank God, no. None. Or to tell you the truth, if I could, I wouldn't. I'd deny it. But the intellect wants to say, well, wait a minute. Some of this sounds so good. Some of it sounds so intriguing. Some of it even spurs me on to thinking about certain things. If I could just be certain, if there was just one place that we could start this. There's got to be one cornerstone, one foundation. I mean, such as any religion. It's all right, here's the Word of God. Here's the Word of the gods. Here's the... There's got to be one place to start, and then we'll build from there. No. If you do that, you got your foot nailed. If you do that, you'll never get off the dance floor. And as all of you know, that kind of nail in the foot causes extreme blindness, which is only a heartbeat away from total Has it happened to you already? The idea, may I suggest, is so hard that it will attract hardly anyone to say, think more than you have to. If in some way we tried to put together, buy up the time and replace some of these places of infinitely, what do they call it, infinite car wax, or the food processors that will run forever and do everything, including minor surgery in the home. If we could replace some of these shows with some kind of, I don't know what, we call it, here it is, the brand new secret. How to make money in real estate, how to get more slices out of a tomato, plus how to make your car run forever, all of it, plus make you infinitely happy, sexually potent and attractive, and everyone goes, yeah. And you say, all right, here it is. The trick is, think more than you have to. And if we did some kind of build-up, gave away free samples, free beer and hot dogs, and got people sort of interested, they'd say, all right, wait a minute, now there's got to be more to it than that. Especially if while you were running the food processor or something, if some of you came out and you wore a turban and you looked kind of faint, and they thought, well, wait a minute, this has at least mystical insinuations. And they say, all right, what is it? You're holding back. Does that mean we don't just send in the 1995 for the first book or course? After that, it's going to be something like you're going to say, come along with that and say, all right, this is the beginning, but if you want the real scoop, send us $1,995. So what is it? Who's going to accept the fact? Who will just take it that thinking more than you have to is a direct kick, instead of you taking it to carry the picturization since nobody cared for it? It's like you giving a direct kick to the goobers of life itself, to the dance of destiny, that you're dancing along, and every now and then you kind of go, oops, like you meant to turn or give life a dip, and life wasn't ready for it. That's thinking more than you have to. But ordinary intelligence would still, all you got to do is check yourself, still wants to ask, well, wait a minute. The idea almost sounds interesting, let's say. But what do you mean by that? What else do you have to mean by that? Well, you said think more than you have to about, along which line? See, that's the whole point. Ordinary people, to talk about such line, by line is simply a synonym, an operational synonym for me saying vanilla or chocolate, positive or negative, pro or con. Ordinary people, if they say, wait a minute, let me try it this way. I'm talking for them. To think more than you have to. All right, let's pick a subject, whether man has free will or not. Okay, go ahead. And they say, all right, my belief is, I'm pretty well read, and all right, forget it, just tell me. And they say, all right, well, hell, we're all pretty well read. If you can talk, you're pretty well read. And so this ordinary intelligence says, all right, my present feeling is I'm inclined to say, I'm not convinced because I don't think in it. Will you come on? All right. I'm pretty well read. You've said that. All right, I'm pretty well read. I read, Psychology Today and Yesterday and whatever it is. And it's my present feeling that that it cannot be scientifically in any way determined as of yet as to whether man has any free will or whether he is just a genetic machine that can talk and fantasize, but he is still as driven and held by his biology and his genes as dogs are. Well, what are you saying? Well, I'm saying that I don't think anyone knows for sure. And so how can you tie this in? I'm still talking for them, see. They're talking to me. How can I tie that in with thinking more than I have to? Because I've thought about it all I can. I read about it because I've always been interested in that. But I don't think anyone knows. And since I'm not going to second guess all the world's greatest biologists, even though they don't know, I'm not sure I know. So how can I think more than I have to about that? And if I say, well, think about it a second. What do you think about that? What can they come up with? It's not because they're dumb. It's because of the polarized nature of the flow of energy. If they take it, say, all right, wait a minute, I'm going to try it. I'm going to think more than I have to about it. What can they do? You're on a merry-go-round. Whatever it is, pro and con. Let's say pro, it doesn't matter. But let's say pro is going counterclockwise, the way that God intended merry-go-rounds to go. That is in the northern hemisphere. In South America, you people know otherwise. So there you are, and you're going to think about what the problem is. Is there a God? Is there any justice? Does anybody know where the shoe is to match that one in the highway? Any question you want. And the ordinary intellect says, all right, you're suggesting to think more than I have to. Now, what can it do? And if it says, all right, I'm going to try this. I trust you. I like the idea. Or I don't know I'm going to try it. It's as though they got off the horse on the merry-go-round. And it doesn't matter which way they were going. They were going in some manner, or they wouldn't be interested in this. You remember that? That was one of our theorems from Saturday. If you're interested in anything, don't ever forget this. You have an interest in it. You got to accept that, or we can't get any further. You've got to have faith, friends. And if you don't have faith, send me some money. No change, bills. So you got to get off the horse. Let's say we're talking about this particular merry-go-round, this particular idea, does man have free will or not? is he actually held by the destiny of his genes? So if ordinary intellect says, well, you say think more than I have to. All right. I've already told you what I think. Now, of course, I made it a little more complicated to start with because I know that you people have complicated outlooks. In other words, many people would say, well, all right, the question at hand is, does man have free will or not? Most people go yes or no. I don't mean most individuals go yes or no. Half of them go yes, and half of them go no. The pros and the cons. So if I was just being a little more rhetorically complex by saying we had somebody going, I'm not sure. You know, in the city, that passes for being very complex. I mean, that's how you tell in the city that somebody is really hip, sharp with it. It's while everybody says yes. Well, half of everybody says yes, and half of them say no. The intellectuals go, we don't know. Nobody ever wants to think about that, but that's a sure sign that you're sophisticated. While everybody else says yes or no, you go, I'm not sure. Of course, then those kind of people look around. Life makes them look around to see if the rest of the people are going, what kind of crap is that? In other words, being sophisticated is not flying then. They can quickly, trust me, they can size up what the majority is and they'll say, oh no, you misunderstood. We said we didn't, no, we disagree with it too. The best they could do is get off the horse on a merry-go-round. When they're trying to pursue, if they were listening to this, of thinking more than you have to, and then trying to show the folly of this. They'd get off their horse, that is, whichever way they're going. Is man free or not? That's the question. And this one person that we're talking to, my imaginary example, he goes, no, man is not. But I'm going to try what you said to think more than I have to. Did I tell you how much I've read? Yeah, you told us all that. And so, but your present belief, your present thinking about this question is no. Am I correct? Yes. Yes, you are correct. My feeling, my thoughts are no. Are you going to try and attempt to think more than you have to? Yes, I am. What he would do is then get off the horse on the merry-go-round, still going, and he will try and walk in the other direction. But do you understand that that is not going to lead anywhere? It is not, as much as it sounds metaphorical, even symbolic. That is the nature, that is the physical nature of the operations of the intellect that they're still playing with. You cannot come up. He could change his mind if we want to really get sketchy with this and sophisticated. But that has nothing to do with independent thought. That has nothing to do with revolutionist thinking. That is not thinking more than you have to. Thinking more than you have to, the have-to trick, the have-to part is everybody is supposed to, that is, you have to either think pro or con about anything you think about. Thinking more than you have to is somewhere that has nothing to do with pro or con. Therefore, there is no way to get off your horse, walk backwards, walk sideways, try to run faster even in the direction you were going, and say, well, I'm trying to consider that which I've never considered. I'm thinking about the alternative. It's not what we said. Well, I'm trying to take into consideration the slight possibility, as slight as it might be, that I could be wrong. And so I'm now trying to consider my opponent's views. I'm trying to consider the other theories. I'm trying to consider, as silly as it is, that someone else's idea could be correct in this matter and not mine. Now, if that's not thinking more than I have to, ha ha ha. Well, ha 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 to you. That is not thinking more than you have to. Thinking more than you have to has got to be, since I made it up, it has got to be something that has no relationship to pro or con. It's not pro to anybody's con. It's not con to anybody's pro. And it is not the ordinary field of independent. That is, well, those two views are not going to get it. And one of them looks especially weak. Looks like a poor wildebeest that's crippled. I'll attack it, and I'll become the wildebeest. I'll eat it. I'll replace those Christian Democrats. I'll replace vanilla. I'll replace the Democrats, and then I'll be in the dance. That is not thinking more than you have to. That is still playing the dance. That is still dancing with genetic destiny. Nobody knows, not the troubles I've seen. I'll tell you something worse than that. Nobody knows how many times we've heard that song. Nobody knows the reality of thinking more than you have to, except those doing it. And part of what makes some of this sometimes funny or paradoxical, whimsical, obliquical, is that only a person knows if they're doing that which apparently has no discernible purpose, that is, thinking more than they have to. And if they were to condescend, to try and mention it at all, then they are back to not thinking more than they have to. So it's that nice old trick that if somebody says, I'm thinking about this more than I have to, which is a form at the city level, them saying, I'm being objective, I'm an independent thinker in this matter, that even if at some time they were, they're not now. Because you have now gone back into that great exemplary reality of facts follow acts, because you're now telling what kind of guy you are. I'm the kind of guy that I just don't go along with just everybody's opinion. I don't care whether it's the opinions that come down from Harvard or from the University of North Carolina. Not me. No, I'm independent. I'll take several different views and I'll weigh them. I'll ponder them. That's me. That is not thinking more than you have to. That's thinking just the exact amount. Yes, but sometimes I think more than others. I know. Well, sometimes I even have a brother-in-law that thinks more than I do. But sometimes I think more than he does. Like they're waiting for us to go, uh-oh, you caught us. So you can't get caught. Unless you are thinking more than you have to. Another, right quick, things that we have mentioned in the past that almost all can now fall under that category, but verbal descriptions we've used before in this kind of, if you were truly attempting to get out of the genetic tango, to get out of the genetic line of succession, wherein you personally, which is of small consequence except to you, but to you, to your ideas being in this genetic line of succession, which is a proper succeeding one idea, one generation, one person, but one idea, let's try, after another, and are their replacement. That is the lines, the order of succession. If you were attempting to fight this, besides my description of, or the method of thinking more than you have to, you can also look at the one to say that you are thinking about more than one thing at a time. Or at one time we called it neuralizing, which I could put to you. We could bring that up to date a little bit. Remember, we described neuralizing as being able to think about things without remembering them. And those of you that got too good, I took half of you aside and I said, it's really being able to remember things without thinking about them. And of course, I encouraged all of you to get together in that, if you remember, in that 59 Buick and to drive over to Birmingham together without taking any antiperspirant. So I assume that all of you in some way got something out of that. Besides an assault on your sensibilities. But besides describing neuralizing as that, how about this? It is a facing of the future with as little connection to the past as possible. So that's 7 minutes, eh? I did not ignore the opening salvo. So we're going to also discuss cost, but we're out of what I was going to pull it into to tie it to. Very specifically, was going to take a bit of your verbal time. But assuming we'll pick that up next time, assuming there is a next time. You could on your own think a little bit about cost. And in the sense that we brought it up a time or two of how you could not have soldiers worried about the cost of the ordinances, or else when it came time for critical shots to be fired, you might have problems. They might not get fired off. Consider that whole list. The need for heroes, the fear of death, the intrigue of antiquity, the belief that in some way life was better and we've gone downhill, we've fallen from grace, or on a technical level, perhaps we are rising. We're getting, of course, more scientifically, commercially, consumerally advanced, but at what cost to our immortal souls? You know, as though having dishwashing powder that won't leave those unsightly spots on your glasses is going to make you less of a good Buddhist. At least that potential is there. Consider the kinds of costs that would normally be involved in that list, those manifestations. What cost are they extracting from man for you to believe in gods, for you to fear death, for you to love the past? And, of course, equally, assuming all of you are sane, just in the middle of the meaning of that, to not only love, cherish, long for the past, but also to love and cherish being up to date enough to be able to exercise and fill your own spiritual space, have the right kind of dew, right kind of clothes, and yet simultaneously being sophisticated enough that while you're there, having a nice glass of, nowadays, Washington State Chablis, and your nice Dudge standing next to your Beamer, if suddenly somebody mentions Balzac, and tears come to your eyes. All of those things are quite necessary in city life, and I'm going to obviously have to leave hanging the idea of cost, because to ordinary people it would be a different thing to say, well, it's costing people at the ordinary level, at anybody's ordinary level, to say, well, it's costing people to be concerned over the apparent crimes, setbacks, misdemeanors prevalent in human life, that it's costing people to have some kind of concern over death and to apparently erect these great theological, if not theoretical, structures, great designs of life after death and gods and religions. It's one thing to even consider the possibility that's costing ordinary people, which we'll put laughingly. We'll respond to that next time we meet. But think about yourself. And then consider, is there another cost? Is there an unseen cost to a few select people here and there that might try and free themselves from this genetic line of succession running through man, wherein your ideas, your beliefs, what seems to be your life across this 60 or 70 years, goes in a proper succession? That you might have some dream, some possibility of interfering with this proper, stable, orderly, line of genetic succession. So that perhaps you too, after being exposed to many good ideas and eating bran, watching your cholesterol, that maybe you too, even some of you I know are pushing on up in years, but maybe it's not too late that you too could buy a Buick, become a Presbyterian, watch a lot of TV and stay generally pissed, upset. I mean, it may not be too late. But I was going to ask for a few other people they might consider, is there a cost going on with this that I never realized? Well, stay tuned. How's that for a teaser? Next time we will answer that question. We will. I wouldn't lie to you. I wouldn't, no. We have to subscribe to the Jimmy Swaggart Spiritual Code of TV Honor, so trust me. Until the next show's on, go ahead and send in your, those big old envelopes, no change. Sometimes it tears the envelopes open. But send it in, and you can rest assured that next time we shall answer this question.